Hi, my name is Derek Hicks. I'm going to continue with our discussion on 3 Mile Island. I'll be talking today about the waste cleanup, which was a huge problem that occurred with 3 Mile Island. One of the biggest issues that operators faced and the cleanup crew faced was actually getting into the building itself. The containment building did a very good job of containing the gas. It actually held pressure for many years after that. Cleanup started in the summer of 1980. The accident occurred in March 28th of 1979. So until that day when they began to vent the building of the Krypton 85 gases, there was still pressure there. These short-lived nuclear radioactive isotopes had decayed away. It was just the gas that had to wait for that. The initial cleanup crew entered the building. They wore anti-contamination suits. They had breathing apparatuses on. They were fully guarded against any contamination that occurred. They also sent robots in, and robots are in just to survey the damage that actually had occurred. Once they entered the building, they began to wash down the walls of the containment building. It had lots of radioactive isotopes, particles on the side of the building. They were trying to wash the whole thing down into the basement. The basement was another problem. The basement had over 500,000 gallons of water. This was another huge problem. This radioactive water had to be pumped out into special tankers. These tankers had to be designed. It took a long time for the fabrication process to occur, and they also filtered the water on the way in. The way in, the water was filtered by basically a water softener. It was a filter mechanism used to clean these radioactive isotopes out of the water. Another easy way to clean up and get rid of part of the waste with all this water, the 500,000 gallons of water, was just to evaporate it. The water evaporated and it was left with just the isotopes, the particles in the water from the metal and the core. Like I mentioned before, cameras had to go in. The cameras were mounted onto robots. Those were easily used to survey the damage that occurred. Once the workers had actually begun to reach the reactor vessel itself, they use a process or a method of boroscoping, which is to take cameras, remote cameras mounted so they can actually tunnel through and look down into the reactor vessel itself. When they reached the inner core, they found something very alarming. They found a void that was about 5 feet deep, where the whole core, fuel assembly, the control rods, everything was actually missing. And that led to part of the granular rubble that they found laying down into the core. They also found bits of fuel rods, the fuel assembly itself, the control rods. Everything was laying down in the bottom of the core. This led to a lot of problems in the defueling process. Well, the defueling process normally would be using standard tools. The standard tools were made to fit the nuts and bolts that were used to capture and mount the fuel assemblies and so on. These tools were pretty much rendered useless now. The tools were not in the same shape. They took a lot of pictures of what was going on inside the reactor vessel so they could make tools. These tools were not small tools. The tools, some of them reached as long as 35 feet long. It actually took 1 year to fabricate all of these special tools based on sizing and the pictures that they had taken. Defueling did not start once they manufactured the tools, however. It took 6 more years. The 6 years was used in mock-up and staging and trying to actually minimize the amount of exposure that each worker had. So they went through the process, they learned about it, they tried to use the tools so they could work out any kinks or any flaws in their plant. Once the defueling actually began with the tools that were constructed, the workers ran into another problem. The water was actually still in the vessel to cover the fuel. The water became murky due to the stirring of all the contents and the moving around of tools and equipment within inside the vessel, and the mounting of the remote operated cameras that were used to guide the tools on. The water when it became murky, they couldn't see. Visibility was actually limited to about 1 inch. They had to refilter the water that was inside of the reactor plant. So yet again, they had to stop work for about a summer so they could construct a device so they could filter the water to improve visibility. Once this hurdle was over, defueling process was completed. It produced over 100 tons of spent/damaged fuel. All in all, it took 342 fuel canisters, the kind that travel upon railroad cars, so they could transport over to the Idaho containment facility. That fuel is still there. It actually reached there in 1991. It was about 12 years from the time that the accident had occurred. The total cost of this was $836.9 million as of September 2012 to store and defuel it. There is a trust, however, and there's another $576 million remaining. The plans were to, when they defueled 3 Mile Island 1, to also go ahead and get rid of 3 Mile Island 2. However, 3 Mile Island 1 now has the license extended out to 2034. At that time, both plants will begin defueling. So next up is Mr. Dan Hunt. He's going to talk to you a little bit about how the commercial industry has changed and the possibilities of recurrence again and what we can do to actually prevent that.